All righty then, let's see. Some people are going online. All right, great. So hello everyone, hi. Welcome to the next round of the Domino Lecture series. Today we have a very interesting lecture lined up, and the title of the lecture is Flagging Nationalism in Turkish Drama. And the lecture will be given by Dr. Petra de Bruijn, from the Turkish Studies Department at Leiden University. Before we begin, I would like to briefly introduce Petra to you. And Petra, if I miss out on anything, please just feel free to chime in and just add along anything that I miss out. So to briefly introduce Petra de Bruijn, Petra de Bruijn obtained her PhD at Leiden University in 1997 and works as a university lecturer at the University Institute for Area Studies for the Department of Middle Eastern Studies. She combines in her scholarly work research in the field of modern Turkish prose literature with research in the field of performing arts, especially modern Turkish theater and Turkish film and Turkish television drama. Her current research concentrates primarily on the usage of nationalism in Turkish television series. She combines her scholarly work with a position as Executive Secretary of Leiden University Center for Study of Islam and Society, LUCIS. From 2010 to 2018, she has been involved in the Netherlands Inter-University School for Islamic Studies, NISIS, as Executive Secretary, and from 2015 to 2018 as Director ad interim. She has published on topics as diverse as the plays and novels of the Turkish author Adalet Ağaoğlu, the usage of miniature painting as a postmodern technique in My Name is Red by Orhan Pamuk, the depiction of Islam in Turkish cinema, and the use of politics in the television series of the Gülen movement. In addition, she regularly contributes to the Encyclopedia of Islam Free, published by Brill. Moreover, she writes on topical issues for the Leiden University Islam blog and wetenschap.nu. I hope I pronounced that last one correctly.
Yes, sounds good.
Welcome, Petra. We are really looking forward to listening to your presentation. I'm very excited. I just saw a little bit of it when we were doing a practice, the other day. So I'm curious to see. Well, I had a little sneak peek, But just before we begin, it might be also useful to introduce our discussants, Esra, Ercan, Bilgiç from our department, from the Department of Media. Esra hocam, hoş geldin to you also.
Thank you very much.
Esra, would you like to just very briefly introduce yourself? I'm sure that many people in the audience are familiar with you, but it might be still useful for the people that are seeing you for the first time.
Okay. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will try to contribute as a discussant. I have also studied so far the relationship between nationalism and media. My PhD dissertation especially focuses on the contribution of the newspapers in Turkey during the early Republican era in the formation of Turkish national identity. I have also studied television news and the reproduction of nationalism in television news and reproduction of national identity. So I'm familiar with this literature. So I think therefore that I am here at the moment. Thank you very much for inviting me, Ivo Hocam. And it's very nice to meet Petra de Bruijn. So the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Okay, well, now I have to share my screen. And then you will see my PowerPoint, and then I can start, isn't it?
Yes.
Wait a minute, let's see. It is already shared, isn't it now? So
yes,
now I can start now. Okay. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Well, recently I read Soner Çağatay's new book, Erdogan's Empire. At the end of the book, he concludes, at the same time, Erdogan wants to correct Atatürk's legacy. drawing on his successes and then impose his own ideological veneer on them. The result is green, the color of Islam, Camelism. Well, I was intrigued by this term, green Camelism. And I tried to look it up. I saw that it was used earlier by Ömer Taşpınar, but the term might as well be as old as the 1980s. Although I think at that time the term Türk-Islam synthesis was much more in use. Well, what Taşpınar and Çağatay indicate with this term is the merging of Turkish nationalism with Islam, in which the veneration for Atatürk as the savior of the country remains intact. And that's an interesting concept. Within the current political situation in Turkey, a division in nationalism is developing along the fault lines of the societal dichotomy between secular and religious parts of the society. A nationalism in which Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and his policy of relegating religion to the private domain takes a central position, and on the other hand, a nationalism in which Atatürk is still acknowledged as the savior of the country, but he made a mistake by not emphasizing the Sunni religious character of Turkishness. Atatürk is gradually disappearing in the nationalistic narrative of the religious ruling parties. At commemorations, the role of Atatürk is mentioned, but not prominently, and he is not remembered anymore so much. I argue that looking at the way Atatürk is presented in nationalistic military series could be an indicator for this phenomenon. As you all know, Turkish television series, dizis, are big business. They reach a large part of the Turkish population and are therefore important means of communicating a message. As scholars such as Berfin M. Çetin and Joshua Carney have shown already, there is a strong link between dizis and Turkish politics. One would expect the division in nationalisms to be visible in the dizis as well. So what I'm interested in today is in which way do you see this divided nationalism depicted in this series? Depiction of nationalism, of course, can be found in several categories. It may occur in language, speeches of characters, expressing love for the homeland, etc. But it also may take the form of actions, fighting for the homeland, sacrificing oneself for the homeland, and ultimately dying for the homeland. But it is also shown in audio and visual symbols referring to nationalism, songs, flags, and depictions of Atatürk. In this lecture, I will focus mainly on these visual symbols and songs and try to answer the following research question. To what extent can visual presentations of nationalism, the flag and depictions of Atatürk and nationalistic songs be an indicator for the divide in Turkish nationalism? What I will do first is embed my research in a theoretical and methodological framework. In addition, I want to use the defined categories to look at examples from recent Turkish military action series produced for and broadcasted by Samanyolu, TRT, Fox TV, Channel D, and Star TV. Theoretical methodological framework. I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a media scholar simply because it didn't exist at the time I started studying. My research is to be placed in the realm of culture studies. Have, for instance, as Raymond Williams frames it, I'm looking at and here I quote, the production and conditions of production within a historical identifiable body of practices and cultural relations, unquote. Popular cultural products, such as these are, of course, are produced to generate income for the production companies. In order to do so, the audience should be able to identify with the political content of the series. In this respect, the series represent a political reality existing in society and send out a confirming message to the audience. In order to analyze audio and visual symbols of Turkish nationalism, I make use of the concept of banal nationalism as coined by Michael Billig. And here I quote, in routine practices and everyday discourses, especially those in mass media, the idea of nationhood is regularly flagged. Even the daily weather forecast can do this. Through such flagging, established nations are reproduced as nations with their citizenry being unmindfully reminded of their national identity, unquote. There has been done research on banal nationalism in the Turkish press in 2000 by Arus Yumul and Umut Özkirimli, and in 2012 by Aynur Köşe and Mustafa Yıldız. But up to my knowledge, no research yet has been done on flagging Turkish nationalism in television drama. Taking into consideration that these studies do not analyze visual media, they did give me several points useful for my own research. In the Turkish case, banal nationalism flags are display of the flag and use of the red and white colors of the flag, display of portraits, busts and statues of Atatürk, idealization and glorification of the past, be it the Ottoman or the War of Independence, the international prestige of Turkey, and in the context of this series, this action series, the prestige of the Turkish army. So that is the concept of banal nationalism in which I place my research. I analyzed these banal national flags, indices, by using the flags as categories in a qualitative content analysis. And for this purpose, I selected military action series as material. And I did that because nationalism in such series is more than usually flagged in an army environment, which is logical and would hold true for all other armies all over the world. I looked at a wide range of categories headed under the main category of indicators of Turkish nationalism. What I did was I looked at indicators of Turkish nationalism as the main category, with subcategories of secular and religious nationalism. And in these subcategories, I studied visual symbols of nationalism, songs, text, plots, mise-en-scène, and characters. For this analysis, this is work in progress. For this presentation, I will look only at the first two categories. I have to admit that I did not yet systematically look at all categories. But the first two, visual symbols and songs, are what I will present in this lecture and what I studied in depth. For this analysis, I will compare the flagging of Turkish nationalism in several series supposedly related to the different forms of Turkish nationalism. I made my selection of popular series attaining high ratings. That was more or less my criterion. They should be within the 10 highest ratings. And then I look primarily at ratings on a yearly scale. For religious or seasonal scale, for the religious form of nationalism, I took Şefkat Tepe, Passion Peak, and I looked at the short series Sedel Bahar 32 Saat on the Çanakkale campaign. Secular nationalism is represented by the series Vatanım Sensin, Savaşçı, and the series Söz. Let us start with an example of a historical series, Sedel Bahar 32 Saat, or Sedel Bahar 32 Hours. The series is produced by Okur Film and broadcasted by the TRT in 2016. It tells the story of the heroic resistance of a small group of insufficiently armed Turkish soldiers who were able to resist an English invasion at the fort of Sedel Bahar at the outmost point of the Gallipoli Peninsula at the start of the Çanakkale campaign in 1915. The Çanakkale campaign was an effort of the Allied forces to conquer the Dardanelles and push through to Istanbul in order to end the Ottoman involvement in the First World War. But the Allied forces didn't succeed and had to retreat after an 11-month bloody campaign with many sufferings and casualties on both sides. The series, of course, was produced in the slipstream of the many Australian and Turkish series related to the centennial commemoration of the Çanakkale campaign in 2015. The storyline focuses on Bigalin Mehmet Çavuş and his family. This is a historical character. He is one of the alleged heroes after which Turkish soldiers are still referred to as Mehmetçik. Historical stories of different Mehmets circulate, and this is only one of these stories. The storyline focuses on his family, himself and his family. In this series, they are depicted as God-obeying villagers who feel a strong love for the country they immigrated to. Because as you see, Mehmet Çavuş was born in Bulgaria. His son and girlfriend volunteer as soldier and nurse to join the army. Mehmet is a professional soldier, so he was already at the front at that time. Father and son fight bravely, and Mehmet is able to withstand the English invasion. When we look at the visual Turkish national symbolism in this series, we have to realize that it is still the Ottoman Empire we are talking about. So, except for the flag, we don't see other symbols. Religion, however, is omnipresent. All characters are pious Muslims who regularly play, especially before they start fighting. But what about Mustafa Kemal Atatürk? He was around already in this period. Turkish and foreign historians disagree on Atatürk's role in this campaign. Some Turkish historians, and then I'm talking especially of the Kemalist period, claim that Atatürk's role was decisive in this campaign. Others, such as Yücel Yanıkdağ and Edward Eriksson, nuance this view and argue that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. As always, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was a young officer, just as several of his colleagues. The senior officers in this campaign made serious mistakes, and it was thanks to the younger officers who took a firm line that it was won. They argue that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was just one of these young officers and certainly contributed to the victory, but he didn't do it all alone. In this series, Atatürk is shown only one time. His role in the victory of this battle is limited to the delivery of weapons. In the fourth episode, between the 38 and 40 minutes of this episode, we see Hussein, the son of Mehmet, who is exhausted wandering through the landscape. Shortly before, he heroically combated the enemy on his own. Now he's on his way to find the officers to inform them about the desperate situation in Saddlebacher. From over the hilltop, with the sun at his back, Mustafa Kemal on a beautiful white horse and his man come down. For the visual effects, two things are important to notice. Mustafa Kemal comes down, so that means he is looking down on Hussein. By coming down from the hill, Atatürk is always higher as Hussein, even when he dismounts. The sunlight behind Atatürk firstly mystifies his entrance and secondly gives him a halo or corona. Well, Atatürk dismounts and gives Hussein water from his water bottle and asks Hussein to carry ammunition to Saddlebacher and give his regards to the commanding officer on behalf of Mustafa Kemal. When Hussein understands who he is talking to, he looks back in full admiration, as if Mustafa Kemal is already the famous founder of the republic he later became. Well, let us now look at this fragment. And in order to do so, I have to quit my... So what we have seen here is that although Atatürk is only visible in this fragment and not in the rest of the series, and he is not ascribed a heroic role in these historical events in this series, which is probably accurate for this battle, when he is staged, he is depicted as a good and compassionate young officer. At the end of the second episode of this series, after the first day of the battle, the camera roams over the battlefield where many casualties are lying. This is alternated with flashbacks from Mehmet's family members who are saying goodbye earlier to their loved ones when they went to the battle at the start. At that moment, we hear on the background a song by Özlem Taner, who sings Seher inende. I suppose, and maybe you can help me out on that one, that this is a Turkmen song because she first recorded it on her album Türkmen Kızı in 2005. And that also means that I have to admit that this is my own translation, that I had problems with two words, Aney Oy and Yavri Oy. And I assumed that it is Ane and Yavrum. That's the way I translated it. Well, the poem, and well, excuse my Turkish reading, reads Seher inende aney oy okunur ezen. Dizlerim tutmuyor yavri oy odamı gezen. Ellerim varmıyor da aney oy bir mektup yazam. Vurma zalim vurma aman yaram derindir. Akşam ezininde aney o va neler oldu. Yaptırdığım evler yavri oy haraba oldu. Ellerin vatanı da aney oy bana yurt oldu. Vurma zalim vurma aman yarım derindir. Ben bu yaradan kurtulursam da yavri oy Mevlam kerimdir. Okay, well, this poem expresses grief for the atrocities of the war. In the second stanza, the soldier puts his faith in the hands of the homeland. That is something else as being prepared to die for the homeland at all costs. In the last sentence, it is indicated that in the end, it is God that decides. So here we see nationalism, but also a strong religious embedding of this nationalism. Okay, well, let us contrast this fragment of a series broadcasted on the government-leaning Turkish state television with a series broadcasted from 2016 to 2018 by a commercial, more government-independent channel, at least at that time, Channel D. And the series is Vatanım Sensin, Wounded Love, produced by Yağmur Taylan, Durun Taylan, and Onur Güven Atam. The series tells the stories of the occupation of Izmir during the War of Independence, and it concentrates on the resistance movement in Izmir, and in the second season, partly on what happens at the front and in what happens in Izmir. Cevdet, the main character of the series, is the father of the family, and it is based on a real story. He is a Turkish officer who, on behalf of the military commandment, infiltrated the Greek army as a spy. The other family members join the resistance. And because they don't know about the double role of their father, they, of course, regularly get into trouble with the Greek authorities and their father. Visually, nationalism in this series is flagged by the Turkish flag and how important it is for citizens, as demonstrated, for instance, in the 15th episode, when a Greek government representative is visiting Izmir. When he does so, the resistance women, led by Cevdet's daughter, stitch together a giant red and white flag, and they let it down over the Greek flag when the official is welcomed by the military commander, and of course that causes a riot. In addition, in this series, nationalism is also flagged by the well-known song associated to the Çanakkale campaign, The Market with the Mirrors in Çanakkale. Çanakkale içinde aynalı çarşı, ana ben gidiyorum düşmana karşı, of gençliğim eyvah. Çanakkale içinde vurdular beni, ölmeden mezara koydular beni, of gençliğim eyvah. Çanakkale içinde bir uzun selvi, kimimiz nişanlı, kimimiz evli, of gençliğim eyvah. Çanakkale üstüne duman bürüdü, 13. fırka harbe yürüdü. Of gençliğim eyvah. Çanakkale içinde bir dolu testi, analar babalar umudu kesti. Of gençliğim eyvah. This is used as in this song is used as a form of protest against the Greek occupation in Izmir. It is done so in the 15th episode, when the women sew the flag. They sing the stanza of this song, 2 stanzas of this song, and again in the 30th episode, when the whole family is incarcerated, here 3 stanzas are performed. The poem itself expresses, just as the song in the previous series, grievance on the atrocities of the war and the spill of young men. But in this poem, no religious connotations are made. In the series, several historical persons involved in the War of Independence appear. Famous writers such as Halide Edip Adıvar, Mehmet Akif Ersoy, and the well-known military and civilian commanders such as İsmet İnönü. Already early in the series, Mustafa Kemal as leader of the resistance is mentioned. He sends messages, he praises Cevdet's work and the work of the resistance, but he is not depicted at all in this series. In the last episode of the first season, episode 31, it comes close to it. The bad guy in the series, Brigadier General Taufik, who is in love with Cevdet's wife, visits Mustafa Kemal at his office in Ankara. An English spy made him conduct an attempt on Mustafa Kemal, thwarted by Cevdet by exchanging the briefcase handed to Atatürk. When Taufik is about to enter the room where Mustafa Kemal is sitting, a very strong, dazzling light is coming out of the room. We, the audience, only see Atatürk's feet, as you see in the picture I show you here. And later, when he opens the exchanged briefcase and reads Cevdet's letter, we see his hands. It is as if Mustafa Kemal is too elevated to be depicted, just as the Prophet in Sunni Islam. We may conclude that the esteem for Atatürk in this series is much higher than in the TRT series we were looking at, even to such an extent that he becomes venerated as a holy man. In contemporary series, Atatürk, of course, is not staged as a character, but he is present through his portraits, statues, and busts. The first example I want to look at is Şefkattepe, Passion Peak. It was produced and broadcasted by Samanyolu for 4 seasons from 2010 to 2014. During the first 2 seasons, the serial Şefkattepe focused on a regular army unit near a border village, Karapınar, in the southeastern region of Turkey. In the first episodes, it is indicated that the serial takes place in 1997. In the serial, a Kurdish PKK cell terrorizes a village. The events dominating the serial are attacks on the village and the kidnapping of people, mostly women and children, for extortion, and young girls and boys who are recruited for the PKK. The serial focuses on moral, righteous, and human behavior and wanted to stress the unity of Turkey. And of course, religion was an important factor in this series. From the 3rd season onward, a team of special forces, the Sungular, Falcons, is established, and the main character, Serdar Bert, becomes the commander of this unit. This team did not so much fight the PKK anymore, which at that period is negotiating with the, in real life, negotiating with the government for a peace treatment, but concentrates on Kurdish and Islamic terrorists in Syria, and sometimes they infiltrate themselves in the Syrian border area. The series action mainly takes place in rural areas. Visually, there is not a strong emphasis on national symbols, although, of course, the Turkish flag is present at appropriate places. And dying for the Turkish flag is an important heroic deed, as shown in episode 97. And I will show you the fragment of this scene.
Ulan şerefsiz! Ulan ben sizi! Koruma ateşi! Doktor yardım et! Doktor yardım et! Yardım et lan!
Okay. Visual references to Atatürk are not so very frequent in this series. When a portrait of Atatürk is shown, it is in combination with a painting of Mehmet II entering Istanbul, for instance, in episode 119. As background music, Kurdish music and Ottoman and Turkish music is played, but only instrumental, no songs. So, such as what you heard in the fragment I was showing you of the Mehter March at the background of the fragment in episode 97. We see in this series that Atatürk is not prominently present and that references to the Ottoman Empire are also made. For the music, Ottoman and Turkish military music is used, but only instrumental. Well, let us now turn to a contemporary series. The first one I want to discuss is the series Söz, or The Oath, broadcasted from 2017 to 2019, produced by Tim's and B Productions, and broadcasted by Star TV. It focuses on a special forces unit within the Turkish army executing operations in southeast Turkey and Syria against the PKK and its Syrian branch, the IPG. The Turkish army and its soldiers are presented as honest, good-looking, brave, patriotic men and women, and their enemies, the Kurdish warlords, are extremely violent, ugly, and corrupt. What I want to do now is show you a fragment. I'm going to show you, actually it are two fragments, but I put them in one fragment, but it is quite long, more or less 4 minutes. And I did that because in this fragment you see more or less all the Turkish national banner flags on all levels of filmic narrative, this filmic narrative medium. You see it on the visual level, on the sound level, the mise en scène, and the acting. But I'm not going to discuss all of this. I only concentrate here today on the visual flags and songs. But first I want to make you look at this fragment. So, as you have seen, all flags, national Turkish flags of Turkish nationalism can be found in this fragment. Of course, the flag is very important, which is omnipresent in the series anyway. The flag appears at government buildings, which is, of course, normal. Embassies, schools, graveyards, in the offices of the officers, on the bodies and the coffins of deceased soldiers. Well, in this series, the Turkish flag obtains a nearly sacred status. As we see in this fragment, Kurdish fighters try to conquer the primary school, and they try to strike the flag, and one of the members of the team, by endangering himself, and fighting with another character on who is the one who might save the flag. He goes out and rescues the flag and hangs it from the chimney of the school. Well, this love for the flag is enacted even more extreme in this series in episode 40. Here we see how one of the team members runs forward, is shot, and dies holding the rope of the flag in his hand, preventing the flag to be stricken. This whole fragment takes more or less 10 minutes. And that's why I don't show it to you today. But it is a very strong enactment of Turkish nationalism. But going back to our fragment, in this fragment you watched, you also find the portrait of Atatürk in the corridor of the school where the soldiers are hiding and where the men are fighting for the honor to rescue the flag. It is as if Atatürk is protecting them when they are shelled at in the corridor, and it is as if the soldiers get approval of Atatürk for rescuing the flag. Well, then the song. When they hang the flag at the chimney, they sing the song Gün doğdu. Well, and as you have seen, I will not repeat it. It has been sung in the fragment already. It is a very nationalistic song, but it is also a very interesting song because it is a song that is changing like a chameleon. It, as it is presented here, is a version used by the Turkish army for decades already. And by choosing this fragment, what the producers of the series did, they took a very neutral version of it. But for decades already, also, it has been very popular in the version of Group Yorum, with a very revolutionary text referring to the struggle against fascism and imperialism. And lately, the song has become very popular among Turkish people supporting the AKP in campaign meetings and by football supporters at matches. So you see that this nationalistic poem is used in all range of Turkish society. And what the series here does is taking, well, which is of course not so very strange, a quite neutral stance. The series made abundant use of songs in their episodes. Sometimes it are Turkish folk songs, sometimes popular love songs, sometimes nationalistic songs, as in our example. Other nationalistic songs used are, for instance, in episode 6, the Alay-Marşı, the Regiment March. In episodes 36 and 65, the Commando Ande, the Oath of the Commandos. In episode 74, again, the Çanakkale song, Aynalı Çarşı, and the national anthem. And I'm sure I haven't yet indicated all of the nationalistic songs, because I found out quite recently and I have to go through all the episodes more systematically. Okay, well, let us turn to our last example, which is the series of Savaşçı or Warrior. It is a nationalistic series, of course, broadcasted from 2017 to 2022, I think. I think it has stopped. I couldn't find new episodes anymore for this season. Just as sus, the series narrates the story of a special forces squad in the Turkish army and their families. It is produced by Limon Film and broadcasted by Fox TV Turkey, one of the few media independent from the government. The nationalism displayed in this series reflects a very strong secular Turkish nationalism. This is underpinned by the strong visual presence of Atatürk in the form of portraits, busts, and places of commemoration. For instance, in episode 77, the first episode of the 4th season, an important decision is taken with the large portrait of Atatürk at the background. And when the commander wants to commit suicide, he chooses a restaurant with a splendid view on Atatürk's mausoleum. And just as in other series, references to the War of Independence are plenty. In the same episode 77, which is very rich, it seems to be dedicated to the heroic deeds of the Turkish army anyway. Nearly all 20th century wars and battles are referred to by the aged father of the commander, who is a retired officer. But the reference to the War of Independence is really special. The commander and the 2 team leaders are traumatized in the series from the last episode. They resigned from the army and withdrew from society. The main character, Khan, is seen camping with a mobile home at the entrance of the main graveyard for victims of the War of Independence at Dumlupinar near Kütahya. Khan meets with a veteran, and the veteran takes him to the graves of which he is taking care, and he tells Khan to pay attention to the names and the dates of the graves. It are all graves of very young people. The youngest man buried there is only 8 years old. And he says, the veteran says, that Khan is still in the prime of his life and that he should not give up his position in the army. The homeland needs him. As you see, it's also making a special contribute to Çanakkale by showing graves of people who live in Çanakkale. The series does not use songs, only instrumental heroic music as background is chosen for the as background for the actions. Well, now that I have discussed several fragments of and flaggings of nationalism in several series, I want to come to a conclusion. We have looked at visual symbols of Turkish nationalism in these television series, and we have looked at songs used in the series. We have seen that all series display flags. Flags are used as symbols of banal nationalism, in the sense that in military circles, flags are displayed at several places, which is only natural. In addition, the flag in this series becomes, in some of them, an object of love for the homeland. We see this in the 3 contemporary series and in one of the historical series. Mustafa Kemal is present in person in the 2 historical series, but in Selbacher Otto's Ikisat, his role is limited, and although he is displayed with due respect, he is not venerated as a holy person as in Vatanım Sensin. In the contemporary series, portraits of Atatürk are on display in all series. In Şefkat Tepe, they don't appear often, and in addition, a portrait of Sultan Mehmet is shown. In the series Söz, banal depictions of Atatürk are fragment, but without a special emphasis. In the series Savaşçı, on the other hand, Atatürk does get a special place. Large portraits are on display when important decisions have to be made, and other symbolic places, such as the Atatürk mausoleum in Ankara, and the War of Independence graveyard at Dumlupinar are also on display. Regardless of the fact that some research to other series and categories has to be done yet, would it be possible to draw a conclusion, a preliminary conclusion about the way these series reflect the divide in Turkish nationalism? Well, to a certain extent, I think it is possible. What we have seen is that the more secular a series is, the more prominent Atatürk is present. In Saddlebaher 32 Saat and Şefkattepe, Atatürk's role is not prominent. In Vatanım Sensin, Atatürk gets a holy status, and in Savaşçı, Atatürk is clearly a source of inspiration for nationalism and personal guidance. The series thus holds a middle position. Atatürk is banally flagged, but not prominently. With respect to songs for the series, which contain songs, because not all of them contain songs, Saddlebaher uses a song in which religion takes an important place. In Vatanım Sensin, one of the oldest Republican, if you could call it so, nationalistic songs is used as a form of national resistance. And in Söz, songs are also used several times as a kind of display of resistance against the enemy who want to divide the Turkish nation. So to conclude, I think we could say that the religious secular divide in Turkish society is reflected in this TV series. And this proves once again that Turkish television series are strongly connected to the social political context they are produced in. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing, and then I think we will come back in the main room again.
Yes, wow, Petra, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. At certain points when I was watching the footage especially, I really felt like there was something, getting inside of me. I felt like my chest was getting constricted, I'll be honest with you. And maybe, before we begin with, Esra Hoca, the immediate phrase I would like to say as a, summarizing phrase would be the many flavors of Turkish nationalism, or nationalism for everybody in Turkey, a little bit, I'm saying this in a bit of a sarcastic manner, of course. So I have my own comments and questions that I would like to share. But beforehand, I think it would be best if we now turn to Esra Hoca, who I'm sure has also many things that
thank you very
like
much, Ivo Hocam. Thank you very much, Petra. It was a very good presentation. I'm really impressed by your work. You actually spent, I'm sure that you spent a lot of time while watching all these series, the episodes. Yeah, it's very hard work. I would like to start with perhaps with a discussion on the concept of banal nationalism, maybe. I would like to begin with maybe the meaning or the main attributes of banal nationalism. Actually, when we read Michael Billig, the idea of banal nationalism is very much related to the subconscious or the unnoticed, But can we argue, or can we say that in all these television dramas, nationalism maybe is hardly unnoticed? Actually, it's very overt in many cases. Or we can also observe hot manifestations of nationalism. Can we still think about all these symbols and all these objects or semiotic? Semiotic symbols as banal, or maybe should we call them or should we understand them with some other concepts? Maybe can we widen up the limits of banal in this case, especially when we are talking about Turkish dramas? What would you like to say about this conceptual discussion?
I have been thinking about that as well, and I totally agree with you that sometimes these demonstrations of nationalism go beyond banal nationalism. I think certainly there are banal nationalist flagging in it. There are military series, so the Turkish flag is over everywhere. That is certainly banal nationalism, but and also for the songs that holds most of the time true, because they are background music. Only in Vatanım Sensin, when people really start singing a song as a resistance, then it is not banal anymore. And yes, it is something I have to deal with. I'm glad that you mention it. I've been thinking about that, yes, because in some places, but what I think is interesting to see is that things that might have been only banal national flags in Turkish nationalism become more than banal national flags. That's something I'm thinking about that might also be interesting. I've been really hesitant to use this term banal nationalism. At one point it fits, and at one point it doesn't fit. But yes, it is a mix of it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your answer. Do we have any questions from our audience, Ivo Hocam? Can we check the chat screen? I cannot.
I'm just looking through. I can also request to our viewers, if you want to ask Petra a question, please do so in the comments section of our broadcast. I will put the question onto the screen, and then Petra and Esra Hoca will comment on the question. So please, if you want to share anything about what you just saw, any comments, any opinions, please go ahead and do so. In the meantime, I also have some comments that I wish to make, and maybe it's more, I want to just pull the discussion onto a broader ground to kind of discuss what this nationalism really means. So it is a little bit that, I agree that we are at a point where it's not just one nationalism, where, as some commentators would like to say, that this is, that this is a hegemonic project, that the state is really embracing or trying to instrumentalize nationalism in Turkish society and to recreate the new citizens and so forth. I think that the situation is a little bit more complex, that, each makes their own kind of nationalism, so to speak. So we are in this kind of position of maybe a hybridized, so to speak, or, multiphonic, whatever, kind of, nationalist symbolism, whatever you like to call it, or many nationalist discourses. Would you agree with this? And also the idea of green Camelism. So when I first actually heard it, I thought about something completely different. I thought about ecology and whatever, But obviously, it shows my understanding of my interpretation of things. But maybe we can try to open this up. What do you mean by green Camelism? Do you mean that the AKP is trying to instrumentalize the already existing discourses created by Camelism on Turkish national identity and adding on to it certain elements that make it more green? Or would you say that the AKP is using the state's resources to kind of, so to speak, copy-paste or to replace a lot of the iconography that was created through Kemalist nationalism with its own?
Yes. Well, I think that's really an interesting. It was also the first time I heard about this term, and I really was intrigued by it. Although I had been thinking about the concept already for a few years, because because at first I was really surprised to see that Erdogan was using Atatürk so much in his whole discourse. And I think it's simply the legacy of Atatürk is so strong in Turkish society, still is so strong, and so much felt among the whole society, religious and not religious people all together. that one way or another he can't afford to completely get rid of the legacy of Atatürk and replace it by himself as the savior of the new Turkey, which he very much wants to become. But when that is not possible, he's instead, and that's more or less what Chagatai argues as well, he cannot get rid of Atatürk because Atatürk still has so much respect in Turkish society by everybody. And what he does, therefore, is bringing him back. Don't commemorate him. Don't mention him so much anymore. Not to the level that has been done by the Kemalists before. But still recognizing that he is the savior. And what I didn't take that picture here, but I've seen pictures also where Atatürk is Erdogan is giving speeches, and then you see at one point you see Atatürk, and at another point you see himself, and that's also a very strong imagery. Mm-hmm. He wants to become Atatürk. Mm-hmm. But also we can't get rid of him, and I think that is more or less what I think is you find that back in this series. Mm-hmm. You see that the more government friendly series are not so much focusing on Atatürk anymore, and therefore I regard Şefkat Tepe as a government-friendly series because it was at that time. After 2014, that's over, but at that time they still, at least in this respect, followed the official campaign. And anyway, I think 2010 to 2014 is already, again, a time which is history. It has passed, and it is already... the situation is different, I think, today. Mm-hmm. And in that way, I do agree with Chagatai, and maybe calling it green Camelism is a bit strong. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, yes, there is something going on, and nationalism is defined differently in Turkish society today. And I think that is reflected in the series.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we can also think about all these Turkish television dramas as the indicators of a new phase in the historiography of Atatürkçülük, Kemalism in Turkey. While we are talking about green Kemalism, we should also refer to the coup d'etat in 1980, maybe. This was again a turning point in the history of Atatürkçülük in Turkey. The word Atatürkçülük was invented back then, before 1980 coup d'etat. Kemalism was the term that used to be used by the people or in the literature, but it had leftist connotations. So that Atatürkism, Atatürkçülük was invented by the coup d'etat of the 1980 with references to Turkish Islam synthesis. So maybe we can actually start studying this new phase in the history of Atatürkçülük by starting from 1980.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we should certainly. Mm-hmm. But I think it becomes only manifest recently, at least.
Yes.
When I try to remember. But this military series, I think Samanyolu, I argued that in my article on the series of Samanyolu, they were the first to use this kind of you have Kurtlar Vadisi, but it is not a military series,
Mhm.
and it is more a spice. It is
Yeah.
military.
Yeah.
Deep state
I think
series, yeah.
Samandılu is the first one to use this concept of this military action series.
Yes.
And they started doing that with Tek Türkiye partly, but there it is not really the army which is at work. It's Şefkat Tepe is the first one where you really see this, and I think it inspired, although the people of the series deny it. It's inspired others to do so as well. Also, for instance, I considered also looking at that, but well, for the sake of this presentation, I thought, well, we do have enough fragments. I also I think Börü is a very interesting series.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yes.
I always, my theory about Bruijn is that it's the TV series for the Perinçek supporters. You know, it's nationalism for Perinçek people. You know, this is my. It sounds pretty silly, I guess. You know, but just to make an extra comment. So you know, we are talking about pro-government TV series like Passion Peak, which I love the translation. It sounds like a good telenovela, actually, right? In English, you know, Passion Peak. But in these pro-government series, the depiction of Kemal Atatürk is actually quite interesting because it chimes in very much with the government line on, especially Erdogan's line on how he is trying to tackle the legacy of Camelism. If you notice, he usually doesn't refer to Atatürk as Atatürk. He uses Gazi Mustafa Kemal.
Okay,
And
I didn't notice that.
Yeah. He specifically he avoids using Atatürk and he uses instead Gazi Mustafa Kemal, which is very much also has connotations, as Esra would probably agree with me, in the traditional more leftist interpretations, which is also, I find it quite funny, that, you know, leftists don't like so much the emphasis on Atatürk, but more on Gazi Mustafa Kemal as the military revolutionary, you know, and this is that kind of that, you know, he was okay until he did the revolution kind of a thing, you know. And
exactly.
Basically, and it's quite funny that, you know, Erdogan, as the, you know, populist, I would say, manages to, you know, very much, you know, steal this kind of jargon. But this also works very well with the pro-government kind of, you know, TV series representations, wherein he is just seen as this commander, military figure that's kind of distant, you know, and so forth, you know. So it might be useful to read those two things alongside one another, because I think they work in synchrony, you know.
Yes,
and maybe it comes. Sorry, I interrupted you, Petra. Do you want to say?
No, I will look at it. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
Sure. And maybe to make one more comment about this, to, you know, really open up the discussion. So we have the, you know, government, we have iktidar, so to speak, that has a very specific interpretation of what, you know, where Mustafa Kemal should stand in the, you know, let's say spectrum or in the universe of Turkish nationalism. It has a very specific interpretation of what Turkish nationalism should be, and is really trying to do this, or really trying to impose this interpretation onto Turkish society through popular culture mediums.
Yes.
So what do we call this? A hegemonic project. Remembering, I know, Raymond Williams, Antonio Gramsci, British cultural studies, you know, Stuart Hall, and so forth, you know. This is a question to both of you, actually.
Maybe I can add something to this. Maybe we can also think about audience part. You know, people do not always interpret television series according to their intended message or intended dominant codes. So maybe we can also consider this fact and speculate on it a little bit.
Yes,
unless if you're sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I think that is absolutely true, because it's and that's, well, that's, maybe I'm not a social scientist, so I don't do interviews, and I have to admit I do look at YouTube comments and on, but well, sometimes on Facebook pages, but not systematically. At least I've not done so. Although I think, and that has simply to do with the fact that I didn't have enough time to do so. Looking at the series at this level is more or less what I can do. And more than that, I simply don't have the time to do it. But I think it's necessary, yes. And and that therefore, but while you as media specialists know better than I do, I think doing social science research, reception research on this kind of topics is very important. Although I have a bit the impression, but well, that is just a feeling. And for me, I'm sitting here in the Netherlands and I watch Turkish television series through internet, either through Blue TV or through YouTube, and nowadays through Netflix. But it is very isolated. My Turkish television world is my study room, and no more than that. But I am under the impression that also this series create their own audience. For instance, when I was studying this series of the Gülen movement, nearly none of the people I know had ever seen an episode of this series. Well, they had very high ratings, and it was possible to see them on internet everywhere. Nowadays, it's coming back. They had been away for a few years. It was not possible to find them on the internet, but nowadays they come back. But and so I have the impression that also, but I do not know. You probably know better than I do. I also, when I watch, for instance, and that's a completely different subject, but it's related to it. When I watch the Fox Haber, the news bulletin on Fox TV, I'm always wondering who else is watching this. Is it a bubble that is watching it, or does everybody watch it? And that's a question to you both.
Fox, especially Fox, right?
Yes.
Maybe the supporters of the Republican Party watch Fox TV more than the others, right?
Yeah. But is that true? Or is society so much divided at the moment that people watch only the television channels that are propagated by their political
Actually, yes, there are many research conducted on the basis of, Twitter maybe, or the basis of the viewing habits of the audiences. Yes, we live in a highly divided society. This is a fact. Don't you agree, Ivo Hocam? There are many studies, including, for example, Emre Erdoğan Hoca. He also works on this division between people on the basis of Twitter, big data research, especially sometimes. So yes, yes.
And maybe an additional answer would be to say that people also don't watch TV. At least the younger part of society. And that's maybe the second answer that will complement what Esra just suggested. Yes, I agree totally that it's almost like, a television channel for your worldview, and I mean, I do, framing studies with my students in my undergraduate class, and quite often what you see as presented as one media frame from one news channel or one newspaper is almost 180 diametrically opposed to the other one, In one of them, one actor is the bad, actor, the other one is good, So eventually, if you get exposed to this on the very long run, you'll have very different black and white, almost Manchian worldviews,
Yes.
but the point is that, yeah, and I think what's important to kind of emphasize is that, yes, it's a very polarized society, but it's also unequal in terms of access. That, you know, one worldview is really being imposed, while the other one is debatable, because, you know, we really see the iktidar, so to speak, you know, the state, the, you know, status quo, the elite really trying to push, so to speak, their worldview onto the. And yes, I agree with that, Esra, that, you know, it's not a one-directional kind of process, you know, and that, you know, it creates this kind of encoding, decoding, the classical Stuart Hall argument, you know, and this is why they have been ultimately very unsuccessful in building their own cultural hegemonic project. This is something that Erdogan emphasizes time and time over in his own speeches, saying that we have managed to win everything, but we are not able to enforce our culture, our worldview as the commonly accepted norm in Turkish society.
Yeah.
And this is precisely the point. I mean, you know, popular culture and creating consensual popular culture is a fickle process. It's not the same as, you know, sending a kayyum, so to speak, to take over belediye. You know, it's you know, when you get the keys, you know, it's not like a car. Yeah, it's like you get the keys and, you know, you can drive it. So I have two questions, I think. One question that came, somebody sent me via WhatsApp. So I'm just going to throw it onto the screen.
Yes. I will read it. Most of the scenes with images of Atatürk and the Turkish flag also contained military personnel. Did you encounter any non-military scenes that can be interpreted in this framework? Well, as I was studying only military series, I can't remember ever seeing a scene where it was not related to military. No, I can't remember. Of course, for instance, when you look at, well, that's not completely true, because what I showed you a scene from Vatanım Sensin, where they were suing the flag. And they are not military, they are civilians. There you see it. But in the military series, like Sus, like Savaşçı, like, well, Saddlebahar, 32 Saat, all the others, which are really military, concentrating on military actions, there the flag is related to military, and there had you see two kinds of a display of the flag. One of them really panel, in the sense that at all meeting rooms, on the uniforms of the soldiers, there is always a Turkish flag, which is, well, normal, because all militaries have on their uniforms the flags of the countries they are from. But in this series, I didn't encounter military scenes, non-military scenes. And when I have been surprised, because I have been thinking it would be nice to analyze a series which is not a military series, and look at flagging nationalism in this series. But so far, I haven't found a series where nationalism is on display very much. I haven't seen it. I don't know if you have seen it, but I haven't until now. And well, I can't claim that I have seen all. It is to a certain extent. For instance, if you look at this series on Netflix, The Protector, there, especially in the first season, it is really crazy. It's completely touristic propaganda. All the famous places, the Topkapi Palace, the Süleymaniye, the Bazaar, all touristic places of Istanbul are shown. And well, of course, that is also a kind of flagging nationalism. But but things as the flag and as we have seen here, Atatürk. No, you don't see that. At least I didn't see that until now. And I have been paying attention to series I have been watching outside of this military series, but I didn't see it. I don't know what your experience is.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Petra. So let's do one final round of questions and comments. Esra, do you have anything that you would wish to add?
No, thank you. But maybe we can, as a last comment, we can argue that all these series actually are intended to a national audience within a communicative national space, right? And they do not actually, while studying all these series, we should also consider that it doesn't deal with cultural and communicative flows in a global system. So maybe this, I would like to add this one while thinking about the audience, how do they interpret it? We should also consider this global flow. For example, if those series were produced 30 years ago in Turkey, we would not be able to talk about this global flow, but now it's everything has changed. So maybe we should also consider this fact and also try to understand how they reach the audience. Maybe they reach the audience next to another series that's coming from somewhere else in the world, or with other messages, maybe with messages of American nationalism all together. They reach the audience all together. So this is important. I think we should also consider this while understanding or studying all these series and their relationship with nationalism. Do they really contribute to the reproduction of nationalism? Do they really contribute to the flagging of nationalism on the minds of the people? Those are the questions that actually arise, maybe. Yeah, I don't know whether you would like to say something about this.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Interesting question. Yes, and I have been looking at that, and I had interviews with producers, and I asked them also the question: do you consider exporting this series? And they said no. These series are made for a Turkish audience. But on the other hand, I think I have a class in which I compare Middle Eastern cultures, and we also looked at Israeli series. And in Israel, you also have this kind of military special squad series. And also there you see a lot of this kind of things you see in this series.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not so much emphasis on the flag, because I think that is really something Turkish. But it is something you see in other series as well. And also those, well, is that true? No, because that series was on Netflix. It's the series Fauda.
Fauda, that's the one I was about to say. It's a bit of a crap series.
Yes, but well, it's also very much has this nationalistic feeling, and but then from the Israeli side, and that is interesting in seeing this series in a global context, because I think, yes, you should, and therefore I think it's also very interesting to see what's happening now with all those Netflix original series broadcasted, which series are broadcasted. For instance, I find it really intriguing why Dirilish Ertuğrul is so tremendously popular on Netflix, although it is not broadcasted on all national Netflix platforms. For instance, in the Netherlands, you can't see it. On the Dutch thing, if you use a VPN, it's possible to watch it from other countries, but not from the Netherlands. But a series like The Protector and this new one, Başka, is on the Dutch Netflix series, and I think that's all really very intriguing to see what which series are how Turkey wants to present itself to the world through this Netflix series. I don't know what you think about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we have another question though.
Yes,
Huh?
we have a bunch of questions from Mustafa Çolak, Oğuzhan, familiar name.
Yes.
So, Petra, do you want to read it or?
Yes.
should I do it?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the great presentation and the organization. Did you encounter any voice change on this series narratives during the whole broadcasting period? What do you mean by that?
And
He's talking about the change on
For
Turkish
example, everyone's point of view radically changed on the Kurdish issue and the HDP. What do you think about political parallelism? Yes, you do see it to a certain extent. For instance, in this Gülen series, you see that at the moment there is a peace process. They focus not anymore on the PKK in Turkey, but they focus on the PKK in Syria or Iraq, both in Syria and Iraq. They do not follow really very much parallel the political situation. What was very interesting is that both Savaşçı and SÖZ, at the moment the Turkish army had an operation in Afrin, had both in their episodes references, not openly, Savaşçı I think more openly than SÖZ, but a strong support in SÖZ. In the whole episode, there was an atmosphere of there is going on something very important, and they were going on a very special, very secret mission, and they had to prepare really very well. They had to say goodbye to their loved ones, and there was a large speech by the commander before they left, and that was absolutely around the time of this Afrin campaign. So I think, yes, there is a kind of political parallelism, although, of course, also these series try to be a bit neutral in this respect. And I think I know that Mustafa, who is my PhD student, is working on Payitaht Abdülhamid, where he told me that there are very interesting parallels between what the government politically does in this time with what the Sultan does in the Ottoman Empire. Well, except for this Afrin incident, I didn't find it that much. But I also have to admit, except for this Afrin issue, I didn't look at it very carefully. And therefore also I have a disadvantage that it is, I'm watching them not at the time that they are broadcasted. I have, for instance, now I'm looking at Şefkattepe, which was years ago. So sometimes I miss a parallel with what is going on in Turkish politics. I'm sure. But partly, yes, there is.
I mean, the pace of Turkish politics works so fast that it's hard to keep up with it, you know. Things that happen normally in, you know, half a year in another country happens in a week over here. So
yes,
exactly.
But to get into the idea of the voice change, I think that, Oğuzhan, Mustafa is very much, Paytat is the perfect example of this, to the point wherein it's almost like the weekly briefing, so to speak, that, President gives is echoed out through Paytat, And of course, there's a very blunt message over here, is that the leader now has to be autocratic, and if he doesn't, and if he allows for democracy, he will end up like Abdülhamit.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, and it's kind of mixed and re-emphasized time and time over again.
Yes, and I can because I looked for the Afrin affair campaign, I looked at it and I tried to follow it also when it happened at the time, but except from this episode where they were really preparing, they were not following up on that. It was only this episode, and of course what you saw in both Savaşçı and in Sus, they had a line. We admire all the shaheeds fallen in and great Turkish soldiers. A line in the beginning of the episodes during these campaigns. That and that happened also in the other campaigns, but it was not always reflected in the actions in the series.
Maybe Burger might be a good resource for this, because Burger is very much based on a revisionist interpretation of the recent past. That it talks about this Hendek operations in the southeast of Turkey, some other I can't remember all of the episodes now, and it puts us through this what really happened kind of conspiracy.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, also this nightclub event. And of course, the last the episode, the film about the coup, yes, they relate really to these things, but not in the way. Yes, in that way they do. Yes, I think so. Yes, you're right.
That it uses conspiracy as way it kind of says that, okay, so let me tell you the truth, so you can be part of the conspiracy, and that's that kind of typical thing that these series love to use.
Yes. Oh, yes. There is a lot of conspiracy theories in all those series. That is really also very intriguing. Oh, yes. In all those series, the Sèvres Treaty is coming along, and there are always foreigners, Americans, or most of the time Americans and Jews who are in some muddy groups trying to and sponsoring the rebels and terrorists.
Yes.
Sponsoring the ugly Kurds.
Yes, or other terrorists, because especially in the later episodes, it's not only the Kurds anymore. Especially in the time of IS, you see that also a lot of Islamic terrorists are in this. In that respect, yes, Mustafa has a point, because that is also true. Yes, you see also Islamic terrorists in the series at the time IS was in our political
world, in our world, basically. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Yes, I think so. It's been a terribly illuminating and interesting conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Petra, so much for joining us. It was a great time. I will think about what we spoke about tonight over a glass of wine, because it was a bit heavy.
Yes.
Esra, thank you so much for being the discussants. Once again, your comments were really constructive. They were really positive. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience for bearing with us.
Okay.
Yes, well,
Alright,
and thank you, because I learned also a lot of from you, and I really I'm very happy to have met Esra for the first time, and I didn't know of her existence. And what I told already to her, I ordered her book, so within a few weeks I hope to be able to read it.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much.
And I hope we will meet.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Period.
In that, I will get your email from Ivo, okay?
Well, yes, if it doesn't give you, you can find it on the website
Yeah,
of the
okay.
university.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you
Alright.
very much for enabling me to share my thoughts with you.
It was an absolute pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Okay,
Alright, so
bye-bye.
that's it for tonight. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Good night.
Good night.